That was after we got close to the Lincoln Tunnel. I planned to drive in. So I apologize. We'll plan better next time. All of the heads of state from around the world are in the city. Do we have like a box or something last time? Thank you. My eyes are bad. I keep forgetting to bring my glasses. I've never brought my glasses to a dars before, so. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Now, did I give you all a handout for the Essence of Unicity? Yes?
Yes.
No? Inshallah, we will.
You didn't have enough last time.
Oh. Was it me who didn't, or did I just send the PDF by email?
There would have been enough paper last time.
There will, inshallah, we will remedy that and become more organized as time goes on.
Thanks. Sorry if I seemed a bit rude.
Let me get to Turkey and back safely this weekend, and we'll be in a better headspace. Tayyib. So I know that we did we do working definitions of Tawhid and Aqidah, or we just talked about prophecy last time? We stopped with the discussion of prophecy. Okay. So he says, the Nabin, the one who has put these lines together, rahmatullahi alayh, alhamdulillahi ala silatihi, all praise is due to Allah for His gifts, thumma salamullahi ma salatihi, then peace of Allah coupled with His blessings, ala nabiyyin ja'a bit tawhidi, upon a prophet who came with unicity, wa qad khala ad-deenu an at-tawhidi, when religion has become devoid of unicity. If anybody has a copy of the metin that says Ara Deenu an at-Tawhidi, the preference is for khala. There's two narrations of it, and there are grammatical arguments amongst the exegetes about which one is more preferable, and the tarjih is for khala Deenu. Tayyib. Definitions of this discipline: Islamic theology, al-Kalam, al-Tawhid, Aqidah. Aqidah can be used for basic treatises of doctrine, essentially a list of those things that you must believe, avow, disavow, that type of thing. Something like your tahawiyah, right? That's called an Aqidah. Then there is a movement toward complexity and sophistication, where we're now talking about what's called usul al-Deen. So most of you all are familiar with usul al-fiqh, which is legal theory. You have fiqh proper, which is a set of subsidiary rules. But then the theory behind why we have those rules is usul al-fiqh. So we have these lists of aqa'id, doctrinal points, almost like a catechism of Islam. And then behind it, right, you have the theory, the rationale, the argument, the understanding, the philosophy behind why we believe these things. So when we move into the Jawharat, we're moving a little bit beyond Aqidah, even though you can still call it Aqidah, into Usul al-Deen. The upper ends of Usul al-Deen, where you're very much involved in disputation and arguments in defense of the religion against critics and so on and so forth, that is really kalam proper. And we'll come back to this idea. But that's kalam proper. So what we're dealing with at the level of intermediate to advanced aqidah, it's really definitely usul al-Deen. You can affectionately call it aqidah. You can affectionately call it ilm al-kalam. Both of them suit. It's a little bit more toward the upper end of what could be termed aqidah, right? And just the lower end of kalam. And, kalam proper would be like the Mutali al-Anwar of Baydawi or the Mawaqif of Adad al-Din al-Iji. Right? These are advanced texts in rational theology. Or you could even say natural theology, meaning arguing for the tenets of faith, not using revealed texts. Arguing for the tenets of faith, right? Not using revealed texts. Because the understanding is that you are in dialogue with people who do not believe in the Quran and do not believe in the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is sufficient for any mosque-going believer. And Imam Ghazali talks about this in the second book of the Ihya al-Deen. The second book and the second section is very important, where he talks about this. So defining this discipline, and the initial reference, we are calling the discipline ilm al-Tawhid. So the definitions are going to begin by circling around this idea of Tawhid. So Tawheed comes from the form fa'ala yufa'ilu taf'ilan, okay, which is the second form in your Hands Weir dictionary, which we usually tend to assume means to make something be the meaning of the word. Okay, to make something. But there are exceptions to that. So kassarahu, right, gives the implication of intensity, right? He shattered it. He didn't just kassarahu. He kassarahu, right? He didn't just break it. He shattered it. So too, wahada yuwahidu tawheedan doesn't mean to make something one, because who are we to make Allah one? It means to know that something is one. That is the implication. And so what you want to be, I remember hearing people before I went away to Damascus, I would hear people saying that Tawheed means to make something one, because they were applying what they learned in school about wahada fa'ala yufa'ilu to it. So, as we've said before, we have linguistic definitions, and then we have technical definitions. So technically, Tawheed as a discipline means a science that enables the affirmation of religious doctrine as derived from certain and decisive proofs. The science that enables the affirmation of religious doctrine as derived from its certain and decisive proofs. Tawheed not as a discipline. That's the name of this definition. The first one was called Tawheed as a discipline, as a field of study, the name of a field. Tawheed not as a discipline, but just plain Tawheed, means technically إفراد المعبود بالعبادة مع اعتقاد وحدته والتصديق بها ذاتا وصفات وأفعالا. The singling out of the one worshipped for worship. I know that sounds a little convoluted, but I like to try to stick close to the Arabic where it sounds more elegant. The singling out of the one worshipped for worship while believing or while having conviction in his oneness in essence, attributes, and actions. The singling out of the one worshipped for worship, meaning worshipping one thing alone. devoting oneself to one thing alone, submitting oneself to one entity alone, the singling out of the one worshipped for worship, while having conviction in his oneness in essence, attributes, and actions, which is very important. The oneness of essence, the oneness of attributes, and the oneness of actions. There is no essence like the essence of Allah. There are no attributes like the attributes of Allah. Nothing other than Him has the same attributes as Him. And there are no actions along with the actions of Allah. He is one in His actions. Or right now we'll just say there are no actions like the actions of Allah. فَلَيْسَ هُنَاكَ ذَاتٌ تُشْبِهُ ذَاتُهُ. Right? And then there is some explanation here. Now we want to move on to something that we call the 10 concepts. Does anyone have any questions on the definitions at all? Did anyone get the sheet? So you all may have taken this before. At the outset of any discipline that we study, oftentimes, the author will bring us the 10 concepts. They're called the 10 concepts, or the mabadi al-ashar, which are those 10 points that if you know them about the discipline you're about to study, it will really help you to encompass what you need to know or grasp from that discipline. And they're summed up in a 3-line poem that says, إِنَّ مَبَادِئَ كُلِّ فَنٍّ عَشَرَ الْحَدُّ وَالْمَوْضُوعُ ثُمَّ الثَّمَرَةُ وفضله ونسبة والواضع والاسم الاستمداد حكم الشارع مسائل والبعض بالبعض اكتفى ومن درى الجميع حاز الشرفا. He says, verily the concepts of every art are 10. Its definition, its subject matter, and its fruits, its virtue, its affiliation, its founder, its name, its sources, its legal ruling, its issues or investigations or issues of inquiry. Some have sufficed themselves with outlining some of these 10, and whoever clarifies all of them will achieve sharaf, or nobility or honor, will achieve honor. So, moving along with our 10 commandments, there we go. I think I was listening too much to the different things that were going on in the rooms down the hall. So we talked about the definition already as ilm al-Tawhid. The next one, though, is the subject matter. The subject matter of this discipline is the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the essences of His messengers. Or we'll say the essence of the messenger alayhi salatu wassalam. The essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the essence of His messenger in terms of what is rationally necessary for Allah and possible, rationally possible for Allah, and rationally impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so too with His messengers. Right? Is there anything that is impossible for Allah? Be careful before you answer that question. There are certain things that are impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yes.
It is what's impossible for Allah?
Non-existence.
Right. Good. Another one?
Have a partner.
To have a partner is impossible for Allah. Right? To have a beginning would be impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? To have no beginning is mandatory for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or necessary, what we call rationally necessary, what the brother said. So there's some things that Allah has to, or not has to, because it implies choice. There are some things that Allah is bound to. First among them, perfection, being free of flaw, being beginningless, being endless, for example. Weakness. There are certain things that are impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like we said, to be dead, or to be surrounded by His creation. What about that? Right? Because Allah can't be surrounded. right? To be surrounded, right, is a sign of weakness. So Allah is not mazrufun, enveloped by His creation. Okay? Huwa qahirun fawqa ibadi. He is the one compelling over His slaves. Okay? His creation doesn't compel Him. And there are things that are possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's possible for Allah?
To create us.
To create us, to create this world, this universe. He didn't have to do it. To be gentle with us, doesn't have to do it. Right? The beauty of Allah's rahmah is that it's not rationally necessary for Him to do that. He's not bound to do it. And this is the difference between us and the Mu'tazila and also Western liberals. Right? If we find difficulty in our lives, well, that doesn't mean that God's not there. It might mean that, as Imam Nawawi said, the dunya is laysat li hayyin watana. Right? This is not the homeland of any living soul. And it's not a place for relaxation and recreation, right? And fun and games. But this is only a test of the emergency broadcasting system. Right? طيب. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. To test you, which of you is best in conduct. Right? That might be the reality of this world, and that's why we find tribulation. As if we had a choice in the matter. Well, you know, I'm not going to hook up Allah by being part of His religion if He's not going to make things go my way. I guess I'll just go somewhere else. Tayyib, one of the early Muslims said, it's as if Allah has said to His creation, من لا يرضى بقضائي فليخرج من تحت سمائي فليجد ربا سوايا. Whoever is not content with my decree, then let him get out from under my sky and find a Lord other than me. Right? As if we had a choice in the matter. Tayyib, if you are completely compelled by, for example, some stronger invading force, and they have you at gunpoint and start ordering you around, or something is going to happen to your children and your family, they tell you to get down on your stomach in the dirt, right? At gunpoint or with all of these threats, what are you going to do? Right? Well, a smart person, right, will probably get down on the floor and say, this is not a battle that I need to fight. Okay? But the point is that you're compelled. You have no choice. Now, if that person decides to be kind to you also, well then, mashallah. But it really doesn't matter, right? Because it's a compelling force over you. And that's what makes the gentleness of Allah all that more beautiful. Because this world doesn't have to have any gentleness in it. Let us keep moving. So this is the subject matter. There are primarily 3 chapters for traditional Tawhid. The first is called Ilahiyat. We'll call it divinity. The second is called Nubuwat. We'll call it prophecy. And the third is called Sam'iyat. Sam'iyat. The Sam'iyat literally means things that come by way of transmission. You can only know about it because a prophet has received revelation about it and reported it to you. I often call it matters of faith, which technically it is, but you have to just make sure that's our definition of matters of faith. The Catholics have something called matters of faith, so they have this amazing theology that seems just so similar to what Imam Ghazali wrote, and right, Ibn Rushd and Ibn Sina and all of this, and Albert the Great would quote Ibn Sina extensively. And then at the end they have a section called Matters of Faith where they put all of the things that don't actually line up systematically or logically. Now the problem being is that their matters of faith contradict logic sometimes. Our matters of faith do not conflict with anything except empirical observation. Okay, scientific method. So definitely our matters of faith conflict with scientific method. However, scientific method is not science unless we've left room for it to be disproven, right? The fallibility principle, the principle of Karl Popper's principle of fallibility. And with this, he and W.V. Quine upset A.J. Ayer and the logical positivists because they were looking for absolutes out of science. And A.J. Ayer was a latecomer to the Vienna Circle. And he was really the main proponent of logical positivism right up until the 1950s, when W.V. Quine came in and Karl Popper came in, and they said, wait a second, you can't get absolute truths, right, that hold like a rational absolute out of observation of cause and effect, because cause and effect is not guaranteed, right? You don't get yaqeen from that. So we're watching that this chemical and this chemical, right, when they come together, there tends to be a certain effect. Or this substance and this substance, when you put the two together, it relieves headache pain. So you give your subjects the pill the first time, and it works. The second time it works. The third time, you get all the way up to the 99th time. You don't know what's going to happen on the 100th time. But you have a good idea. And you have enough of a good idea to call it reliable. But there's the outside chance, you leave a chance for fallibility. Okay? And once a theory has proven fallible, we move on to the new theory. And we work with it, right? So long, Lakatosh said, we work with it so long as it's serving our needs. But when it's no longer is serving our needs, right, we move on to the theory that will replace it. And such is the way with empirical ruling. It doesn't give you certain knowledge, it gives you something called the ghalabat al-dhann, which is a very, very strong supposition or surmise that the same results will occur another time. But you can never be certain, because you might take that, what is it, ibuprofen, and today it doesn't relieve your headache. Right? It doesn't have the same effect. Or you might put the chemicals together and it doesn't work. Right? And David Hume also supported this understanding. Tayyib. I do not remember how we got onto that subject. Yes, so our sama'iyat, they do contradict empirical observation, but what they don't contradict is logic or mathematics, pure reason. Okay? And why? Because we've never been in a position where we can observe the unseen. Okay? So we've never seen anyone actually being punished in the grave, but pure reason doesn't tell us that it can't happen. Okay? It would be one thing if we said that an entity was existing and not existing in the exact same moment. Now that's a logical contradiction. Right? That becomes problematic, because in logic we deal with absolutes. But in the science of observation, tajriba wal mushahada, we're not dealing with absolutes. We're dealing with what we've observed based on our own finite understanding, and we're looking for that ghalabat al-dhann, that very strong opinion that this new pharmaceutical product that we're coming out on the market is not going to cause any bad side effects. They're going to get us a bunch of lawsuits. Right? We have a pretty strong feeling that that's not going to happen. But sometimes, right, it doesn't go the way we thought it should. So the fruit of this discipline, thamaratuhu, is knowing Allah with decisive proofs and achieving eternal happiness. Knowing Allah with decisive proofs and achieving eternal happiness. Why? Because knowing Allah is the essence of every act of worship. Because you could know the fiqh inside and out, but if you don't know who you're turning toward and who you're directing yourself to, or understand that, or if you have mistaken beliefs or understanding about the one that you're worshipping, none of it counts. Knowledge is an act of ibadah when it's knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning it is an act of ibadah directly, without wasita, without some type of mediating element. Whereas the knowledge of medicine could be an act of ibadah bil wasita, with a mediating element which would be my intention to use it for a good cause. My intention to deploy it or employ it, right? I remember some years ago they had a big scandal here in Manhattan where someone was doing late-term abortions and women were getting damaged, and I think someone had died, and all of these things happened, and the doctor's name was something like Abu Hayat. It was Abu Hayat something, right? So the intention is very, very important. And we could lose our direct ibadah, right? The knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gaining the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could be, is a direct act of worship and ibadah, but it could be lost if, for example, I'm sitting up here, right, just to show off, right? So that the people can say, oh, he must have studied for a long time, right? We could lose all of that. So it's all in the balance, and that's why we have to be wakeful and attentive, and we ask Allah to protect us from ourselves. If we could just get protection from ourselves, if you could hire a security detail just to protect you from yourself, if you could outsource that, subhanAllah, I could use that. I didn't think of that before. وَفَضْلُهُ, its virtue. It is the most noble or honorable of all disciplines. Why? Because a thing gains its nobility, gains its honor, in accordance to what it's affiliated to, what it's attached to. So if this discipline is about the study of the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the essences of His messengers, then what is more noble than all of that? Okay? وَنِسْبَتُهُ, and its affiliation to other disciplines is that it is the foundation of all other disciplines. As we said, none of them count unless you have this discipline worked out properly. One of the poets said, أَيُّهَا الْمُغْتَدِي لِتَطْلُبَ عِلْمًا. Right? And I remember another version of, okay. O you who set out in the morning to seek knowledge, كُلُّ عِلْمٍ عَبْدٌ لِعِلْمِ الْكَلَامِ. Know that every knowledge, every science is a slave to the science of kalam. تَطْلُبُ الْفِقْهَ كَيْ تُصَحِّحَ حُكْمًا. You seek jurisprudence so that your rulings can be sound. ثُمَّ أَغْفَلْتَ مُنْزِلَ الْأَحْكَامِ. But you have then forgotten about the one who actually revealed those rulings. وَوَادِعُهُ, its founder. Now, these 10 concepts are standard for every discipline. And, for example, I don't remember what the 10 concepts for Arabic logic say, but I wonder what they would say for founder. Would they say Farabi, who was the first major Islamic proponent of Greek logic, or would they say Aristotle? If I remember correctly, I think that they say Aristotle, even though I'm writing an article right now that demonstrates how Islamic logic is not exactly Aristotelian logic. Because by the time Hellenic logic got to the Muslims, it had already changed several times away from Aristotle. The Stoics made major changes, and then the Neoplatonists made major changes to logic, and then the Muslims themselves made modifications. Okay? But that is not the thesis of our favorite professor from Pittsburgh, Nicholas Rescher. Nicholas Rescher is great. He did some phenomenal work. He's very important. He's one of the first real trailblazers in Islamic logic, Arab logic. His uncle was a convert to Islam and lived all of his days in Istanbul. But he has certain theses that sell Arabic logic. Short and Tony Street and Dimitri Gutas have really challenged a lot of his old theses. So disciplines either really do have a founder or they don't exactly have a founder. Like Aqidah, we can't say that Aqidah or Tawhid has a founder, that before this founder, right, there was no Tawhid. Tawhid has been around since, well, eternity. Okay, so we can't really say that it has a founder. But just like in usul al-fiqh, who do we say is the founder of usul al-fiqh? Imam Shafi'i, right? Now does that mean there was no usul al-fiqh before Imam Shafi'i? Of course not, right? What does it mean? Why do we still say that Imam Shafi'i is the founder of usul? Faddal Sayyid.
He was the first one to codify the methodology.
As a complete system. So before that, things had been written, but they were in aspects of usul, like single epistles in one aspect of usul. He is the first one to bring the whole thing together as a system. And with Aqidah also, Abul Hasan al-Ash'ari was the first person to record Tawhid as a complete system that had methodologies, usul, and it also systematically went through inquiries. So he was, what we could even say, and I hadn't thought of this before also, is that he was the first one to lay down Aqidah as a systematic theology. As a systematic theology, which is a contemporary term. Okay, and in the case of Imam Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari, what he did as a systematic theology, that is actually the very definition of systematic theology, right? In the contemporary sense, because he went from beginning to end, answering using one method, a methodology, right, to answer every single question, right, that was prominent during his period. And at the very same time, there was Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, who did the very same thing in the lands what are called beyond the river, the Oxus River. But the school of Imam al-Ash'ari is much, much more prevalent, especially in the center of the Muslim world, in North Africa, in Asia. They're all Ash'ari. It's just mainly the Persian countries, Afghanistan, Turkey, and for the most part the Indian subcontinent is Maturidi. Tayyib. Moving on. Istimdadahu, its sources. The sources of ilm al-Tawhid are its evidences which are derived, they have rational evidence and revelatory or transmitted evidence. Okay, meaning the Quran and the Sunnah and the intellect. Why? Because when you are reasoning with someone who is not a Muslim, you cannot reference back to the Quran and Hadith. You can, they might find it interesting, but they might also say to you, well, if I believed in the Quran and the Hadith as a proof, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So you have to find some type of common ground. And for some people, not all people, especially some of the people that I passed in the traffic trying to get up here, right? That is not common ground. Okay, and we don't use rational methods for everyone. It only works for some types of people, but it is also extremely important that students learn it because it is the usul of deen. If then afterwards they are going to decide that a particular audience or a particular interlocutor would best be served with some other means of convincing them of the truth of the teachings of Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, well then we would employ those other ways. But we don't know how those other ways are working until we've studied rational theology, right? That informs us of how all of these other methodologies might or might work. So there are lots of reasons why this process is important. Imam al-Ghazali said, no one who has sound faith should be introduced to kalam, what we're studying here. All right? You should leave them. And it's enough for them to read the Quran and Hadith. Okay? Children should not be taught this. He said, except for situations where contrary ideas or scandalous ideas and innovation has become prevalent in the society. Then it's necessary to teach this discipline. Right? So I'll let you all be the judge. Right? Maybe in a village far off somewhere, that would be the case. but I think that we've reached a point where there's a lot of confusion. So, there are all types of things that a doctor, an engineer, or other types of technical professions, I know those are the two favorites around here, there are all types of things that the doctor has to learn and has to know. He doesn't go out and tell everybody, doesn't tell all of his patients, doesn't tell everybody he meets what all those things are, but he knows them and they enable him to do what he has to do. And the same thing with a lot of scholarship, right? We don't fully understand the things that we will be teaching until we understand, right, certain things behind the scenes. وَالْحُكْمُ شَارِعْ فِي. What is the legal ruling regarding this discipline? It is al-wujub al-aini, a personal obligation on every responsible adult, human being. على كل مكلف من ذكر وأنثى, male and female. And it is an obligation that every responsible adult has proof for what they believe. That's actually a personal obligation on every responsible adult. They have to have evidence for their points of belief. And if they don't have evidence and they have the aptitude to study and learn the evidence, then they have done something that is haram or perpetrated a sin by doing so. Why? Because this is an ummah of da'wah. This is an ummah of knowledge and comprehension. And what we're trying to avoid is that in an ummah of da'wah, any intelligent, educated person, if asked, do you believe in God? And they say yes, and then the questioner says, well, what's your proof for that? And they say, I don't know. Right? I heard people saying it, so I said it too. Right? That's what we're trying to avoid. So if the only thing that people have to say is an answer like, all of this created world must have a creator, it's redundant. Right? Even if you were to say, if you're walking through somewhere in the middle of some uncharted forest in South America, right? You came across a pristine house that was built in the middle of nowhere, right? And someone told you it just happened by chance, you would never accept that, right? Things like that are very simple and very easy to learn. And that's all that is being asked of. Is people not making taqleed or imitation in their aqidah. وَمَسَائِلُهُ, and its points of inquiry are what we said before, the things that are rationally necessary, possible and impossible for Allah and His messengers, and those things that we have been asked to believe in that come by way of transmission. For example, the life of the grave and the hour of judgment and the throne and the kursi and the Jannah and the fire and the account and all of those types of things. He said, وَقَدْ خَلَ الدِّينُ عَنِ التَّوْحِيدِ. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ came to the world at a time when the world had become lost to the oneness of God. Except for a few Hanafiya, right, that were living off in seclusion by themselves, right? And we have the assumption as Sunni Muslims, I don't know about other types of Muslims, we have all types of Muslims nowadays, but as Sunni Muslims, the majority opinion is that Abdullah and Abdul Muttalib and all of the Prophet's direct fathers were all Hanafiya, right? All the way back to Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salatu wassalam, and that they weren't involved in shirk. And there is a position that is also a strong position. I'm not confident enough to say that it's the majority position, but I have a feeling it might be, that Azar in the Quran is considered not to be the father of Abraham, but perhaps the uncle who he referred to as his father. Because that ta'wil is possible because in another place in the Quran, Yaqub asked his sons who they will worship. Who is it? No. No. وَآبَاءَكُمْ. And he refers to Ishaq. So Yaqub asked his sons, who will you worship after me? And they said, we will worship the God of your fathers. And they mentioned, Ismail, who is not their grandfather and not one of his fathers, right? But would technically be an uncle, referring to the uncle as a father. So because we have a principle that there is not shirk in the genealogy of the prophets, why? Because they weren't chosen from amongst mankind to be prophets, right? God didn't look at the population of the earth and see that the best among them was Muhammad and then choose him, right? That would be to suggest that there was a time that Allah didn't know who the prophet was going to be, alayhi salatu wasalam. But He knew who the final prophet of the world was going to be before this world was created. Okay? So, we have to be a little bit more gentle with our Belvi brothers, right? They're not that far off. Okay? It's not that preposterous, some of the thoughts and feelings and sentiments that they have. طيب. So, because we have this principle, and because that ta'wil is possible, it makes this argument valid. And many scholars have felt that it is sound. Now he said deen. What is the definition of deen? We know that it has to do with exchange, interaction, account, debt, right? All of these different types of things. But what is the technical definition of deen? One short technical definition is that it's the Sharia of Allah, what Allah has legislated. That is deen. But there is a more serious definition that is worthy of writing down. It is وَدْعٌ إِلَهِيٌّ سَائِقٌ لِذَوِي الْعُقُولِ السَّلِيمَةِ باختيارهم المحمود لما هو خير لهم بالذات. It is a divine convention that incites persons of sound intellect by their own praiseworthy choice, a divine convention that incites persons of sound intellect, and between hyphens, by their own praiseworthy choice, and hyphen, to that which is essentially in their best interest. To that which is essentially in their best interest. A divine convention that incites persons possessed of sound intellect, hyphen, by their own praiseworthy choice, end hyphen, to that which is essentially in their best interest. It is a divine convention, meaning legislated by the divine, that incites, as-sa'iqu, literally means drives people, okay, in a direction. But it essentially, it's convincing enough to motivate them. I wonder if motivating, that motivates people. I'll have to toy with that one for a while. As-sa'iqu, right? So sawq is like driving cattle, all right? That incites people, meaning convinces them and motivates them. What people? People of sound intellect. They are the ones who will inevitably be responsible to deen, because a person who is not of sound mind is not responsible to to the obligations of deen. However, if you have someone who is not of sound mind and they engage in fasting, they fast with everyone else, they pray with everyone else, like a child, they will be rewarded for everything that they are doing. By their own praiseworthy choice, meaning their own free choice. Their own free choice. Because there is no coercion in deen. So in the very definition of deen in Islam, you have freedom of choice when it comes to religion and not compelling someone or the absence of coercion. Right? So if there's coercion, then it's not deen. If there's coercion, it's not deen. Right? Too bad you guys didn't know that when your parents were raising you and trying to dump you out of the bed in the morning for Fajr. La ikraha fi d-din. My kids don't figure that out. إِلَى مَا هُوَ خَيْرٌ لَهُمْ بِالذَّاتِ. Right? To that which is essentially good for them. Or that which is good for them, well, essentially is the thing, by its essence. Right? The essence of Jannah. The essence of ta'atillah. Right? Of being in obedience with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The essence of nearness to Allah. All of that is wholesome. All of that is organically healthy and good for a person's soul. Good for a person's being. Okay, so that is the definition of deen, or the definition of deen, the most technical one, and in it, you could give a whole class just on this definition. Tayyib. Walhamdulillah. And we did our Mabadi' al-Ashar. And let us close with a statement from Imam al-Nawawi. The affairs of deen are four, according to Imam al-Nawawi. Yani the signs that a person has deen in their life. And some of them put these statements into these points, these four points or signs that a person is a person of deen, into a line of poetry. Umur ad-dini sidqu qasdin wafa al-ahdi wa tarakun limanhiyyin kada sihhatul aqdi. Right? So the first is sidqul qasdi, being honest in one's intention. Ada'ul ibadati bin niyati wal ikhlas, performing one's devotions, which means performing one's devotions with a sound intention and sincerity. That's number one. Number two is wafa'ul ahdi, al-ityani bil fara'id wa tark al-manhi. Al-ityanu bil fara'id only. Okay, so al-wafa'u bil ahd, you have a covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The 5 daily prayers have been described as the covenant between us and Allah. So to deliver on one's obligations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the second sign of the presence of deen. The third is tarkul manhi, is leaving off prohibited things, right? Means staying away from the muharramat. And the fourth, sihhatul aqdi, the soundness of doctrine. Jazmuhu bi aqaidi ahl sunnah, right? His conviction in the doctrine of the people of Sunnah. And my apologies to anyone who does not affiliate with Sunni Islam. We're definitely studying Sunni Aqidah here, right? If people are interested in learning that, that's what we have to give. If people want to have discussions, perhaps we could have a discussion, but I wish I could do something different. But as one Shaykh said, that things have to come in a certain fashion. You can't walk into the room and say, I want a car, right? And they say, well, what kind of car? What make, right? And model, right? It has to come with a make and model. You can't say, no, I don't want a make and model, I don't want a car. You sure you don't want a Lincoln? You don't want a Toyota, right? You don't want an Audi? Say, no, I don't want an Audi, I don't want any type of type. I just want a car. I want to drive a car. You can't do that, right? Cars only come in types. Okay, and people have been trying to come up with madhabs that aren't madhabs, and schools of Aqidah that are not Ash'ari or Maturidi, but to this day they failed miserably. And they've been trying since what, the 1950s, pretty much? I'm serious, it's only been since the 1950s. I mean, Israel's older than these attempts. Okay? And it had its heyday in the 70s, maybe the 80s, but then we got to the 90s and we were kind of like, you guys have had about 50, 60 years now, right? And let's get on with it. And as the 5%ers would say, you've got to show and prove. All right. So let us close here, and we'll begin with line 3 next time we meet. فَأَرْشَدَ الْخَلْقَ لِدِينِ الْحَقِّ بِسَيْفِهِ وَهَدِيهِ لِلْحَقِّ. So he led mankind to the religion of truth with his sword and his guidance for the sake of the ultimately real. Right? So I thought I'd leave you with that as a cliffhanger. Sword. Does anyone have access? What is the date for next Tuesday?
The 1st.
The 1st. I have a flight scheduled back from Istanbul on the 1st, so I have a feeling that we won't be able to meet. What is the date of the next Tuesday?
8th.
The 8th. Inshallah, we'll meet again on the 8th. Let us read just a little bit from Sayyidina Muhammad Rasulullah. Is that okay? Y'all aren't up past your bedtime or out past curfew, right? So I shouldn't feel bad about dragging on, coming in late and holding you late. Yes, sir.
Does rational theology then exclude natural theology?
Well, natural theology is rational theology.
Okay.
So natural theology is probably a better word.
Okay.
But rational is more clear because most people are not familiar with natural theology. So either way is fine. But kalam is definitely, it's been described as dialectic theology, rational theology, and I think that we could suitably call it Islamic natural theology. We can definitely make that case. I spent 2 years studying natural theology in the UK.
Shaykh, you mentioned that it's a post-1950 thing that in a phenomena this view, instead of Ash'ari, the Maturidi, Aqidah, that somebody else is coming up with other stuff. But they've been quoting scholars from the 12th and 13th century, and they have their
Those
own.
attempts failed also. I mean, remember that the Hanbalite fitna or schism, how would you translate fitna in English? Right? What's that? The Hanbalite schism, it had a period and then it came to an end. And the Hanabila stopped doing it because other Hanbali scholars wrote against the whole project of anthropomorphism, and literalism. You had different sects that came and went, but as far as Sunni Muslims, so I'd say Sunni attempts to create alternative madhabs, alternatives to the standard too. One of the reasons why we tend to want, one is a feeling of inferiority, inferiority complexes. That's one reason. That's a big reason, actually. Another is not having aptitude. So you have a lot of people who want to be spokespeople for Islam, but they don't have the aptitude to really study advanced disciplines. Not everybody gets into medical school. I know that a lot of you here didn't realize that, right? Not everybody makes the cut, okay? And the same thing goes, really, with the advanced disciplines of the Deen. It's nobody's right to make fatwa. Nobody is entitled to engage in theological inquiry, right? There's no entitlement there. You either make the cut or you don't make the cut. And what we have during this period, we have people who have insisted that the Deen come down to their level. Now, if you are going to your local masjid to pray, if you are looking to just get right with Allah and make your obligations and maybe even illuminate your heart and recite Quran and just raise a bunch of Muslim kids, right? Well, then the Deen gives you everything that you need. Those are low-hanging fruits, and they're sweet fruit. and they're safe fruit. And I'll tell you, they'll get you to Jannah. Okay? And that is a good way to go. However, when it gets to sophisticated arguments and things like that, if we drag our deen down and make it one-dimensional and insist that it be not over my head, right? Well then, this is not a civilization. Okay? This is some type of, Baptist, Protestant, make it up as you go along, Wesleyan type thing, right? One of these North American experiments. And that's not what this is about. Okay? This is a rich and great tradition, and we do have specializations. The idea that we don't have clerics in Islam, is that what we say? We don't have clergy. They say we don't have clergy. And we refuse that. That is a very, very popular idea that comes out of the 1950s ideological political movements, and those are the people that brought this religion to North America and set up the first institutions in the 1970s here. This idea that we don't have a clergy in Islam, it is right and it is wrong. The reason why we don't have a clergy in Islam, or what might be called rijal al-Deen, what is meant by that is that there is no wasita between you and the forgiveness of God. If you make a sin or if you fall out with Allah, you can make amends directly with Allah. You do not need to go to confession. You don't need to be assigned certain Hail Marys in order to achieve the maghfirah of Allah. You can turn to Allah directly. Okay? So you don't need this wasita. In that way, we don't have a clergy. But do we have qualification and specialization in disciplines such as ifta and all of that? Most definitely. We'd be selling the deen of Allah short if we didn't think that. Okay? And all of these projects, they're unsustainable. Right? They're not going to go the distance. And they haven't gone the distance. And that's why you're often embarrassed about what you hear people saying about the deen on television. Right? Meaning what Muslims are saying. Because of all this silly tomfoolery. Walhamdulillah. What was the question? I'm sorry, I don't mean to be the person who goes off on tangents all the time. I never thought of myself as a person who went off on tangents all the time. What was the question?
And the question was the 1950s, post-1950s movement,
Yes.
they actually quote scholars from the 12th, 13th century, so...
Right, so they will reach out to justify their ideas, but they are not students of those scholars. For example, the unearthing of the works of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, that only happened in the 1950s, right? Post the Saudi dynasty was formed in around 1932 or so, and it was only after that that these manuscripts were published and put to market, and then became popular again. So these are very modernist movements. A lot of these anti-rationalist movements are very, very modernist movements, right? So for example, the idea that we could somehow jump all the way back 1,000 years. No, you can't do that. You haven't jumped back 1,000 years. Okay, the mind that we use to read the books that were written 1,000 years ago is a mind that wasn't shaped by the environment of 1,000 years ago. Right? So we understand Arabic very differently than the authors of these books did. So this idea that we can just choose to jump, right? It would be better to follow the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The best of generations is my generation, and then those that follow, and then those that follow, right? And then assume that it is halum men jarra, right? And so on and so forth, right? So that there is a chain of wiratha, of inheritance that goes all the way back. طيب. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. يقول العلامة الإمام محدث أهل الشام سيدنا عبد الله سراج الدين حلبي رحمة الله عليه ونفعنا الله بعلومه وبكم آمين. حول محاسن صورته الشريفة. So, the last time we met, we talked about the 5 reasons why we should study and know the Prophet intimately. Alayhi salatu wassalam. We move on to a section about his handsome appearance. Alayhi salatu wassalam. He says, وَقَدْ أَجْمَعَتْ كَلِمَةُ الَّذِينَ رَأَوْهُ وَوَصَفُوهُ عَلَى أَنَّهُ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ لَمْ يُرَى لَهُ مثيلا سابقا. لم يرى له مثيل سابق ولا نظير لاحق. All of those who saw him are in complete agreement that the like of him was never seen before him or after him. Yeah. Bara ibn Azib, he said, radiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ was the most handsome of all people in his face. Had the most handsome face of all people. And the most handsome of them in character. He wasn't extremely tall, nor was he short. He also says that the Prophet ﷺ was of medium build, marbu'an, ba'idun ma bayna al-mankibayn, broad-shouldered. Lahu sha'run yablughu shahmata udhunayhi. He had hair that would come down to his earlobes. Ra'aytuhu, I saw him in red vestments, red robes, and by Allah, I never saw anything as handsome as that. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu said that the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam was not short, nor was he tall. He had a large head, but what that means is that he didn't have a small head. So it didn't say he had an unusually large head, right? He had a large head. It literally says dakhmur rats. I mean, he didn't have a small head. Okay? Shathnul kaffaini wal qadamain. His hands and feet were thick. Mushrabban wajhuhu bihumra. His face had a trace of red in it. But when they say that the Prophet ﷺ had a trace of red, right, they're not going to mean the pink of Europeans, right? Something of an auburn and ruddiness, perhaps, that you will find among some Arabs. He was tawil al-masruba, meaning the line of hair between his chest and his navel was long. إِذَا مَشَى تَكَفَّأَ كَأَنَّمَا يَقْلَعُ مِنْ صَخْرٍ. When he walked, he would do something called takaffu'. And one of my shaykhs, I was walking with him through the streets of Halab, and I asked him about this phrase, and he showed me what it was, and it's described as that he would have this takaffu' as though he was walking downhill. And he showed it to me, he would lift up his heels quickly, right? So like this. Okay? You know that the munafiqun in Medina used to make fun of the way he walked. He would lift up his heels. It's to lift up his heels quickly like you do when you're going downhill. And I remember that Shaykh Abdurrahman al-Shaghuri used to walk like that. I don't know if that was his natural walk or if he was following the sunnah of the Prophet, but I never saw him walk any other way. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Lam ara qablahu wa la ba'dahu mithlahu. And Imam Ali says, and I never saw before him or after him the like of him. He also said, radiyallahu anhu, That the messenger, and this is a very famous hadith, the messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, so it's the description of Ali ibn Abi Talib. The messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam was not exceedingly tall, nor was he short. Right? And the word that's used here is nor is he short, like he was squished into himself. وَكَانَ رُبْعَةً مِنَ الْقَوْمِ. He was of medium build amongst the people. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ بِالْجَعْدِ الْقَطَطِ. His hair was not kinky. وَلَا بِالسَّبْتِ. Nor was it lanky. It was wavy. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ بِالْمُطَهَّمِ. Right? He was not heavy set. وَلَا بِالْمُكَلْثَمِ. Right? He was not overweight. He was not overweight, nor did he have a round face. كَانَ فِي وَجْهِ تَدْوِيرٌ. He had a little bit of roundness in his face. Right? But it wasn't perfectly round. أَبْيَضُ. He was white with a hint of red. أَدْعَجُ الْعَيْنَيْنِ. His eyes were exceedingly black. أَهْدَبَ الْأَشْفَارِ. His eyelashes were very dark. جَلِيلُ الْمُشَاش وَالْكَتَلِ. Right? His shoulders and joints, right, were thick. أَجْرَدُ. Right? He was, for the most part, didn't have a lot of hair on his body, except that he had this line of hair between his chest and his navel, masruba. Shathnul kaffaini wal qadamain. His hands and feet were thick. إذا مشى تقلع كأنما ينحط من صبب. If he walked, right, he would walk as if he was coming down a hill or an incline. وَإِذَا الْتَفَتَ الْتَفَتَ مَعًا. And if he turned in any direction, he would turn completely in that direction. He wouldn't turn his head around like the Syrians say, like with aql al-asfur, like having the brain of a sparrow. He would turn completely. And I remember in Damascus that I read this, and I remember then walking down the street in Midan, in the Ghawas, and someone who knew me from the neighbors, a tajir. This is not someone who had studied. This tajir, he came out of his house and he saw me and he called me. And I was walking right down, I was actually right in front of Shaykh Sadiq Habannaka's house. And the younger brother of the Shaykh of our Mashayikh, the Shaykh of Dr. Saeed and many other scholars, he called me, and so I stopped and I did what it said in the books. I turned completely to him, and then he was like struck. He came up to me and he said, SubhanAllah, Shaykh Hussein Khattab, who died in the 1980s, rahmatullahi alayhi, and been a student of the Shaykh who was the older brother of Shaykh Sadiq, who was in his 80s at the time, rahmatullahi alayhi. He said, Shaykh Hussein Khattab used to do the exact same thing. So I told him, I said, it's the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Rahmatullahi ala Shaykh Hussein. He was the Shaykh of the Qur'an of Damascus in his lifetime. Like the head Qur'an of Qur'an teaching in all of Damascus. بين كتفيه خاتم النبوة وهو خاتم النبيين. Between his two shoulder blades was, and closer to the left shoulder, was the seal of the prophets, which seemed like a birthmark, right? That was skin that was puffy just a bit. That puffed out just a bit. أجود الناس صدرا, the most generous of breasts. وأصدق الناس لهجة, and the most truthful in speech. You see how my tongue stutters when I try to say that, right? Yeah. وألينهم عريكة, and the most gentle of them towards the people with him. وَأَكْرَمَهُمْ عِشْرَةً, and the most generous of them in companionship. مَنْ رَآهُ بَدِيهَةً هَابَهُ, whoever saw him by surprise was in awe of him, was awestruck by him, and almost to the point of intimidated. وَمَنْ خَالَطَهُ مَعْرِفَةً أَحَبَّهُ, and whoever got close to him by knowing him intimately loved him. And this quality was a quality that I found in Shaykh Nuh Hadi Salman al-Quda, rahmatullahi alayh. Everybody say rahmatullahi alayh. He was the Mufti of Jordan, and before that he was the Mufti of the Emirates, and before that he was the ambassador to Iran, and before that he was the Mufti of the armed forces. And if you saw him from a distance, he was haiba, right, jalal, and very serious. But if you got close to him, it's as if you didn't have a better friend than him. He was the most friendly and most loyal of friends. He was quite old. But that's what it's like. Up close, he was so beautiful, and from a distance, you were very careful. You were filled with awe of him. لَمْ أَرَى قَبْلَهُ وَلَا بَعْدَهُ مِثْلَهُ. I didn't see before him or after him the like of him. And we have to read at least the story of Ma'bad. How many people here are familiar with the story of Ma'bad? One of the brothers here? Sayyid. Imam al-Bayhaqi narrates, and others, that the Messenger ﷺ, when he was making his hijrah to Mecca, he was traveling with Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr's servant, Amr ibn Fuhayra, and their guide, who was Abdullah ibn Urayqat. So who was with him on his hijrah? Abu Bakr, Amr ibn Fuhayra, and Abdullah ibn Urayqat. Abdullah was the guide, and Fuhayra was the servant of Abu Bakr. In their journey, they passed the tent of Ma'bad, or the camp of Ma'bad. And her name was Atika. Ma'bad. And she was a woman who had a great deal of self-respect, and she would sit outside of her tent and feed whoever came by. She would just sit with her legs folded up, and when someone would come by, and she was a rugged woman. She was very strong. Kanat tahtabi, right? She would cross her legs and hold her knees up, pull her knees up. وَتَجْلِسُ, right, like this. Right, so she used to sit like this outside of her tent, and anyone who came by, she would feed them and give them something to drink. So when they came by the camp of Ma'bad, they asked her if she had any meat or milk that they could buy from her. And she said that she didn't have anything because they were going through a famine. And the Prophet ﷺ saw a sheep off to the side, and he said, "What about this sheep, Ma'bad, here? And does it have any milk?" And she said, "That sheep is more weak than to have any milk. And the reason why the sheep is not out with Abi Ma'bad and the other sheep is because it is so sickly, it is so emaciated and frail, we'll say, that it can't even go out to graze. That's how bad off that small sheep was." And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Could I milk it?" And she said, "If it has milk, go right ahead." But she was very doubtful that that would happen. So the Prophet ﷺ went to the sheep and stroked its udder, and then called them to bring a bowl. And he filled up the bowl, and first he gave Ma'bad, And then he gave all of his companions, and then they drank a second time after the first time, and then he drank, and he said, "Saqil qawmi akhiruhum shurba." The one who pours for the people is the last of them to drink. So you should write that down, because it's a principle. Saqil qawmi akhiruhum shurba. Saqil qawmi akhiruhum shurba. The one who pours for the people is the last of them to drink, will drink last. So you'll find that that statement comes in handy in a lot of areas in life. And then he took another bowl, he filled the bowl again, and he gave it to Ma'bad, and he said, "Keep this for Abu Ma'bad when he comes back." And then they left. And it wasn't long until Abu Ma'bad came back and found the milk. And he was very surprised. And he said, "Where did you get this milk from? And there's nothing that can be milked in the home." And she said, "La wallahi, a man, a blessed man, a Mubarak man just came by, just passed by. And he said such and such and such and such." And he said, "Describe him for me, Ma'bad." And she said, "I saw a man who was clearly illuminated. Zahir al-wada'a." Right? He was very clean and bright. Very clearly bright. Hasan al-khalq. Right? He was very handsome in his appearance, in his features. Malih al-wajh. Right? He had a very nice face. Lam ta'ibhu thajla. He was not tired out by having a belly, right? Being overweight. وَلَمْ تُزْرِي بِهِ سَعْلَى. And he didn't have a small head. قَسِيمٌ وَسِيمٌ. He was well proportioned and handsome. فِي عَيْنَيْهِ دَعَجْ. He had blackness in his eye, meaning his pupils, right, were very, very dark black. Okay, and then the white of his eye, so ed'aj is that the pupils are very, very dark, and the white is very, very white. So there's that contrast, which is, very beautiful. وَفِي أَشْفَارِهِ وَطَفْ. And his eyelashes were very thick. وَفِي صَوْتِهِ سَحَلْ. Sahal, right, the voice, when someone has this sort of echo or reverberation of hoarseness in their voice naturally, right? It's like there's an echo inside the voice. That's called sahal. It's not hoarse, right? Especially not in an unattractive way, right? But there's this sound to the voice, and when you hear it again, you'll recognize that that's the sahal. I don't know another way to describe it. He was ahwar. Ahwar means that the white of his eye was very white and the black of his eye was very black. Akhal, it's as if he naturally had kuhal on his eyes. But naturally, not because he put it there. Azaj. What is azaj? No. The ends of his eyebrows, right, tapered off. Okay, so he didn't have bushy eyebrows, but he had dark eyebrows. And she said that he was aqran, right? Whereas other reporters, right, and aqran is to have the unibrow, right? Other reporters, the majority of reporters, said that he's not aqran. He doesn't have, right, the single eyebrow. So they interpreted Ma'bad's description is that he had thick eyebrows, but they weren't bushy, right? And then over his nose, right, there was a very thin line of hair, right? Not as thick as the rest of the eyebrows that connected them. No. في عنقه سطع, right? He had a long neck. وفي لحيته كثافة. He had a thick beard. إذا صمت فَعَلَيْهِ الْوَقَارِ. If he was quiet, he appeared dignified. His silence, right, gave him the air of dignity. And if he spoke, right, you could see brightness and joy in his face. حلو المنطق. His speech was very beautiful. كلامه فصل لا نزر ولا هذر. His words were just enough. He didn't speak too much or too little. كأن منطقه خرزات نظم يتحدرن. It's as if his words, his speech, was a string of pearls that was coming off the string, right, and falling off the string. أبهى الناس وأجمله من بعيد. The most brilliant of looking people and the most beautiful of them from a distance. وأحسنه من قريب. And the most handsome of them up close. ربعة. He was of middle build. لا تشنأه عين من طول. Okay, the eye doesn't get annoyed with how tall he is, right? Nor do people overlook him because he's too short. غصن بين غصنين. He's like a branch between two branches, right? Like a middling branch between two branches. فهو أنظر الثلاثة منظرا. And he's the most handsome of them to look at. وأحسنهم قدا. And the nicest of them, right, in face. له رفقاء يحفون به. His friends, right, surround him or come rally around him. إن قال استمعوا لقوله. When he speaks, they listen. وَإِنْ أَمَرَ تَبَادَرُوا لِأَمْرِهِ. And if he commands them, they're quick to fulfill his command. مَحْفُودٌ مَحْشُودٌ. When he goes about, he clearly has people around him who are walking with him. لَا عَابِسٌ. He doesn't frown. وَلَا مُفَنِّدٌ. And he doesn't turn people away or censure them. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. And Abu Ma'bad said, هذا والله, that is the person Quraysh are looking for. If I was to encounter him, I would ask him if I could keep company with him. And if I saw, in another narration, if I saw him, I would follow him. And I would exert myself to find a way to get to him. And eventually, he and Ma'bad made it to Medina and became Muslims. Alhamdulillah. Barakallahu feekum. Sorry for being late and getting such a late start. Inshallah, we'll finish earlier next time. What's the date for our next time? The 8th of October, inshallah. Barakallahu. Ahsan Allah ilaykum.